coming at you from snowy Southern California. It's the Almost Daily ZenCast. Hosted by the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Featuring original robot dance electronic remix music by DJ Zed. This show is an experimental, free-form, talk radio style, audio, blog, podcast, entertainment show listened to in over 20 plus countries that explores the radical intersection of current events, politics, society, and transcendental spirituality in an unorthodox way, featuring electronic robot dance music for your pleasure. Serving that sweet funk since 1976. That's the title of this track. A techno pulse groove pad live to tape entertainment audio robot dance music remix digital asset music track for your ear holes from the animatronic heart of DJ Zed. Welcome to the show, folks. I am your humble imaginary host, the literary fictional character known as the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. If you're scratching your head at that and wondering about the backstory, head on over to solo.to/Mr. Zeppo, find the Wattpad link, which I believe is titled Welcome to the Zeppoverse, a Tourist Guide, or something to that effect. Click on through to that, create your free account on Wattpad, and show your love and support, curiosity, inquisitiveness, and literary interactivity with the ongoing projects you will find there on my profile. That's a real and genuine and humble invitation. No one from Wattpad is paying me or telling you to do that. I have my own humble literary fictional works ever so slowly grinding away on that profile there. And it is all part and parcel tied together to what we do here on the podcast in a way that will be obvious to some and not so obvious to others. But I'll spell it out for you right here. If you're a longtime listener and you're still not sure, then this is a fun Easter egg of aha. And if you're new to the show, you'd be like, what? I don't understand what he's talking about. But I may have said this once before on the show, but in the books, something that the characters in several of the books, in different places at different times, in different locations under different contexts, but in my books, some of my characters are given or are somehow managed to stumble across or discover an archive of recordings of this character and the various iterations of both fictional and real audio talk show style projects that he's done throughout the years. In real life, I've only been doing this podcast since late 2016, early 2017, I think, or somewhere abouts there. I remember, I think I was tinkering on YouTube when the golden escalator moment happened, and then I hadn't quite yet landed on Sprecher.com, but that's regardless. Neither here nor there. Welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in. Blah, blah, blah. Enough foreplay. It's January. The collective creature that is Trumptopia / the United States of America, because it's like, it's one of, Trumptopia and America are like joined at the hip in some horror show, freakish way, either by birth or by surgery. I don't know which. In the analogy, the way I see them in my head. And we're here to talk about them because this is indeed a talk radio style opinion audio blog podcast show where this dude gets to share an unorthodox perspective on the world's events and how those things and the ideology involved do indeed radically intersect with our spirituality. Just like how, and many have turned a blind eye to the following for many a year, many a generation now. But when we dump toxic waste into the environment in whatever form that we have, as we tend to do it in many, many different ways, it will inevitably wind up in our bodies. Full stop. Right? So even if climate change were a hoax, which it isn't, as I think the cornucopia of crazy cuckoo weather this year should have made clear to many a doubter. In fact, I will not doubt if in the coming months we will see a wave of, I was a climate denier and now I realize maybe I was led astray kind of posts hitting the social media in various waves. Pardon for, because people are returning to different states of approaching some form of normalcy after surviving so many different chaotic, life-disrupting, dangerous, severe climatological disasters. And we will continue to experience them. I wasn't kidding when I said hello from snowy Southern California. It's not falling here, but we are recovering in the polite, gentle way that we get to do here in Southern California, because we luck out a lot. Just the way things are laid out geographically. But we got hit with some serious combo snow and rainstorms, which, although we've had historic, epic, flash flood type rainstorms in the past, this one, and curiously fits my theory, quite fitting my theory. This one was sustained and gentle enough that it caused minimal disruption, minimal chaos. There was some out of the ordinary urban flooding situations in deeply urbanized areas, most especially downtown LA. And obviously in some rural places, some mucky, muddy messes. But we lucked out. But that's the most, if you've seen the photo going around, and I believe I've shared it on the social medias associated with this show, but maybe I haven't. Maybe it's only on my personal one, which isn't necessarily private. But that's the most snow that I, as a longtime lifelong local inhabitant of the SoCal area, have ever seen in the mountains immediately north and east of the city of Los Angeles. So, and as well as in the ones, ranging south. Never mind everything north of here. The images I'm seeing from Northern California are astounding, and they are indeed simultaneously alarming, record-breaking, sort of shock-inducing levels of snow being dumped, and quite unusually, and lucky for us, some of the best snowpack we've ever gotten that should arguably, according to the measurements being done by the surveyors, at least in the immediate term, help rectify the ongoing and much ignored severe drought here in this state. And I'm sure similar things are being said about the conditions in surrounding Western states and their drought conditions. So the weirdness of the past year's weather, which if I do recall correctly, at some point in the show, I spoke of the upcoming weather patterns that I wasn't sure how they would manifest, but I knew they would be unusual and unusually intense. And that I suspected there may be a lot of teeter-tottering. Although I wasn't sure in the earliest of days, it became clear during the course of the year that that's exactly what the climate, what caused or what was causing these climate catastrophes. It's only a catastrophe because people's houses get destroyed, right? A forest fire is a forest fire in and of itself is not a disaster, because as long as it doesn't burn any crops or destroy any buildings, it's actually facilitating organic, natural processes. Something people are not taking into account, generally, and especially those that are hooked on conspiracy theories about all these fires. But I'm not even going to acknowledge that. I'm tired of talking about that. That's years worth of but I was here. I was a couple of years ago. I was literally in the town, in the towns and in the county that suffered the worst of the fires, in which the supposed space laser, the insidiously, subtly racist space laser theories, started coming out, and I was up there in the Russian River area, visiting friends, and I saw the aftermath, and nonsense and malarkey, and the things people will believe just because a picture is paired with words, and those things seem convincing, and then they'll proceed to tell themselves that they've done the research, is even more absurd. But that's a whole nother. Put a pin in that. On the big giant corkboard of all the things we've already talked about and we'll probably talk about again. Welcome to the new year, friends and audience family. Welcome to a new set of opportunities to shake ourselves free from our own malarkey, to transcend as a species, right? As a collective family of individuals, to transcend our own nonsense. Let's hope and pray and push for that. And of course, turn inwards, because that's where that work is done, right? We must, not because I say so, don't take my word for it, I'm just sharing you the thoughts and conclusions I've come to after a lifetime of observing this cuckoo crazy making world of ours. Because do not doubt it, friends, as the world operates, independent, and without the need for any massively cuckoo crazy conspiracy theories. As the world operates, people being talking animals that they are, and building things like culture and societies as they have done. As the world operates, it's cuckoo crazy making. It's toxic. It's damaging to the heart and mind and soul of the tender, innocent beings that life brings forth, and that we ourselves become the perpetuators of. Not only is the world itself, as it operates, long before we got here, long before any of our most true theories or least true theories were developed, it has always been cuckoo crazy making. And none of us escaped a bit of head bashed against the system brain damage of cuckoo crazy making. I don't mean literal brain damage, but I mean none of us, I don't think, grew up free of the overwhelming influence that is at hand. Even those raised by self-aware individuals, that had come to terms with some of the difficult, problematic issues in the world, a generation or two or three ago, because it's all that much more nuanced than any of the theory content even acknowledges or gives it credit for being. What is it? What is the system? What is the problem? Why is the world crazy cuckoo making? And all questions like it are fascinating, of course, but we must, in the efforts of keeping the show tight and snappy and entertaining for those tuning in, we must try to stick to our New Year's resolutions, friends. Here is another chunk of music. Nothing too terribly long, just a little bit of a refresher to cleanse the palate. A track entitled Emotive Frequency Jumpstart, a chilled trap groove pad, live to tape, audio entertainment, recorded performance by DJ Zed for your entertainment. And we're back. Our minds refreshed, ready for another onslaught of logorrhea from your delightfully charming artificial life form from another dimension, talk radio, entertainment, DJ host, myself, yours truly, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Let me hit you with a thought I had, which is sort of like, it really is the nugget, the seed of a whole. It should be. I should set this aside and make it a Mr. Zeppo's totally irrelevant media review segment, but it's been on my brain all morning, and I want to just plunk it down here and then put a pin on the corkboard and hopefully come back to doing a nice, deep, in-depth media review, movie by movie, rewatch, discussion, analysis, special series. So to split the difference, I'm going to talk about this core idea that I think has hit me every time I've seen the Matrix movies, in some form or another. I feel that this is conveyed. I think it's brought to a point, but also obfuscated and sort of buried. They like bury their own lead every time they try to tell it. And this is explicitly obvious, I think, in the scene where Neo finally meets the architect in that video control room. Put a pin in that, because wowzers, when we do come around to doing a whole special media review episode about this anthology, I'm going to go off about that room. The meaning of the multi-layered camera, use of screens representing multiple iterations of the same being, the same identity, the same self, and yet like the architect only references 6 major expressions of the one, but there's way more than 6 Neos on the screen, and just so many thoughts about it. But let me zoom back out and hit you with my big, because I haven't yet. I've just been teasing it, right? Let me hit you with the big headachy thought, the big thinky thought. And it's not exclusive to The Matrix, but this is one of those movies that really tries to show it to you without telling you that it's telling it to you, I think. Maybe I'm projecting it. Who knows? I know that as it hits 22 minutes and 22 seconds, that this is a thinky thought I have long thought, independent of the movie series, in some form or another, as I've explored human history and all the events leading up to our current cornucopia of chaos that we are calling 2022. Humanity has failed to learn the lesson that in postmodern times, the, quote, revolution is actually a tool of the system of oppression. Anybody who's been a long time acquaintance on the social media may recall coming across me expressing this idea in one form or another on multiple occasions. Whenever I see people talk about revolution, either jokingly or seriously or anything in between, I like to remind them that they should stop and pause and consider the possibility, right? If they're really truly into critical thinking, if they're really truly into questioning everything, if they're really truly into their own what's the term? Oh, it just fell out of my head. Not authenticity, their own not hierarchy, their own, what is it? Not sobriety. Damn, my brain is like refusing to pull out the word. There's a word that gets thrown around, like, sovereignty. And why are they so like foaming at the mouth like a puppy dog with rabies for revolution? If it is clear contextually that an attempted revolution would profit the system of oppression, and that the system has its multiple layers of might and firepower that are far more sophisticated and far, more prepared to defend itself than any ragtag revolution, especially driven by nonsense ideology that is being peddled by political puppets that are complicit with the system. It's the statists talking about revolution that make me just I feel like Captain Picard doing a double facepalm whilst also sort of giggling. It's the people that are like attached to a politician that are anti-government but want to import these people into power and create power structures with them, which would be nothing more than just more government, that want to fight a civil war / revolution to overthrow the evil government and put in their own evil government. That, like, oh God, really, you guys? Meanwhile, they're buying their weapons and their ammunition like cigarette addicts, stockpiling cigarettes from the evil corporations that profiteer on the evil thing that is going to destroy them. Right? But I'm the crazy, outrageous one. I'm the deranged one. I'm the one that's cuckoo nut jobs. Like, hello. There's multiple echo chambers, and in every echo chamber, there's a streak of we are the true, righteous, authentic, free of corruption, valid, real people, whatever, select people, special people, entitled people, authoritative people, whatever. And everyone else is invalid. Everyone else, but you are included in someone else's everyone else is invalid. And everyone's doing that. Like, just broad, sweeping declarations. So, I think that, an academic look at the Matrix reveals that that lots of hoopla is made about the Matrix, right? Lots of memes. And put a pin in this, I think they're using the term wrong. I might have already talked about that in the show once or twice. I'm probably going to talk about it again on the show some other day as a sidebar again. And I'm very likely to do a whole special episode about it. Scan for the word Matrix in the catalog of episodes and listen to any of them. I've probably done a nice, in-depth thing. But I'm not attacking the movie. The movie's using the term Matrix in a specific way that has to do with technology and computers and cyber realities and the idea of our mind being imprisoned in a system that replaces reality, but is not really reality, right? But while that idea in and of itself is plausible and we are tangibly making efforts towards making it a reality for ourselves, it's also like the worst possible use of the original word and term for a name for something that's totally other than it. In other words, we should have a different name for everything we now think of when we say the Matrix. Especially if we don't mean the organic, living, fractal holographic, divine mother womb uterus that is giving birth to all life. If we don't mean that when we use the term the Matrix, then we need a different word. Sorry, the Matrix movies, but we can do a really big deep dive into why that is so, etc. But don't take my word for it. Look up the ye olde ancient meaning of the word before it got bastardized. Regardless of that, although I stand by it. The real unlearned lesson from the Matrix is that the system will use a revolution in its favor. That the system will use a revolution as a tool to keep the oppressed distracted, right? And it's very obtusely, it's very unclearly spelled out in the architect's speech in that control room. Because Neo is a function of the system. The One. He says the One is a function of the system. The entire drama, the cataclysm about, and it's hilarious that they chose this name, but Zion, and it's a loaded with way too much baggage name. They coulda, shoulda, woulda picked a different thing. And it's refreshing that they move on to a different city in the newest Matrix. But the entire process of Neo being the one being freed and or liberating himself from the Matrix, leading a revolution against it, fighting the Smith, which, if everyone remembers, is like his evil self within the Matrix. Very sort of not fully explained, but kind of left there to sit there. So are they reintegrated? Are they? Is it impossible for either one to ever destroy the other? Is that why he returns, even though he looks different? I think the fourth movie would have worked more strongly for people. I could be wrong. I think it would have worked more strongly for me. Therefore, I jumped to the conclusion it may have worked more strongly for some of the people that didn't appreciate it. If the same guy was Mr. Smith. But we'll save further discussion on that for an actual special, totally irrelevant media review special series on the Matrix series, which we hopefully will get around to doing sometime in the not too distant future. Other things to hope for, although I wouldn't hold your breath too hard, but do help support, and by keeping me in your thoughts and prayers that I get around to doing this, I've got to talk about everything MCU, starting with my preferred order for the television series, the various television series, plural, and how I think they ought to fit in relationship to the movies. And from there, we're just going to do a crazy lunatic dive into the entire franchise. But that'll take forever for me to get around to organize to actually do. But hopefully it's coming soon. In terms of what I was just talking about now, friends, it's a lesson that we see being used against us now in this current moment, sort of touchstoning my discussion about January 6th yesterday. And I'm sure we're going to discuss it a bit more as we actually live through the first year anniversary of it. The various ways in which people are responding to it, in my mind, is indicative that, there's a lot of abundant pulling of strings and manipulative efforts being done. Because it's the same people that, the attitudes expressed by the same cohort of people, both folks in power or positions, media positions, or just influencers on the internet and whatever, and random samplings of of that end of the political spectrum. It's this cacophony of totally irrationally conflicting sub-narratives. The only thing that the various reactionary narratives on that end of the spectrum have in common is that no matter what else they say, the Democrats are evil and wrong. And that's it. Meanwhile, the Democrats get to build a pretty convincing case that something's gotten unhinged over there in the other party, and they are the viable threat to our ordinary way of life that we're just trying to move forward with, blah, 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 progressive policies that help everyone. It's a cuckoo shitstorm of a multiple echo chamber onslaught of political, ideological, manipulative content that creates a really murky gestalt, wherein most people aren't looking past beyond their little field of vision, their little bubble in the chaotic, churning nightmare mess of malarkey, just malarkey all over the place. I'm not just on the right, because the left is not free of the same sorts of problematic issues. They've just got it all on way lowered, settle down mode. They're wearing the hat of the principled adults that are still capable of logical thinking right now, in comparison to the noise of escalating, crazy-sounding cray-cray coming from everything over there. And no offense, I know that to everybody on the right, there's a thread of it that sounds sane enough for them to latch onto and cling to and bend their own private pretzel around so that they can sort of ignore the accusations of cuckoo crazy coming from the left and indulge only in visualizing and attempting to manifest the cuckoo crazy that is explicitly, outrightly outrageous and exclusively on the left, because that's what the echo chambers do, right? A while back, I made a meme how the right and the left sound kind of the same when you measure it at the level of, like, what are they pointing their fingers and calling each other? Crazy, insane, unhinged, a danger to society. Like, what? They each believe themselves to be the good guys, righteous, virtuous, and true, and on the correct side of history. And they point exclusively to their diametric opposite. And then there's everyone else sitting around going, this is a weird mess. And all of it revolves around us versus them thinking that's baked into every cake. And that's the problem, right? Like, even on our best days when we were kids and we were all super nice, everyone was being bombarded with us versus them conditioning. It's gotten to the point that, like, it creates, like, feedback loop that's ridiculous. There are waves and waves of mean-spirited, critical meme posts, shit posting, trolling, and people giddily indulge in blindly reposting the shit post about their opposition, and then it creates this, like, this reverberation of everyone pointing fingers and mocking everyone else and not seeing how they are sharing this mindless judgment of, oh, the other side's full of sheeple. My response to it is a meme. I don't remember if I've posted it on the Instagram platform yet or not. I know I threw a preview, a rough draft of this at someone recently. How do I find it quickly? There it is. The rough draft that I posted at someone. See, so there's a meme going around with the gray hand, sheeple person face in a big crowd, and they're all saying, what was their original post? Because they were mocking, their other side, and they were repost. And I'd seen this get posted dozens of accounts. I've seen it all over the place, and it said something about the flu making a mysterious comeback. The flu making a comeback after mysteriously being gone last year, right? And the point is that they're all saying it in unison because they're all sheeple and they're being fed. And so the rough draft of it isn't as good as my final draft. My final draft reads, I'm mindlessly reposting memes, judging and mocking the sheeple because I'm an independent thinker. It was supposed to say on the other side, but I guess I didn't fit it in there. It's implicit though. And I kind of now want to update it and make a newer draft of it because it's part of what the original thought I had. It's like both sides will see, you'll just see these tidal waves of the same trending, snarky shit post trolling meme about how the other side is plagued by manipulation because they're a bunch of weak-minded sheeple. But both sides are doing it. And I guess there's a special wedge of like the hardcore Trumptopian supporters, the really true, MAGA hat-wearing QAnon believers. They're doing it too, and they will bend themselves into pretzels to rationalize how they aren't just reposting the waves of snarky, judgmental, conflict-creating content. Because the crowd told them to. Because the crowd think told them to. This is at the core of, like the endless distraction. From what? Ding, 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 ding. That's the question, friends. What are they distracting you from? And everyone's got an answer. But let me ask you this question. The conspiracy theory movement, objectively, as it understands itself collectively today, has been around for about 60 years. And if you zoom back and think about in broader ways, there have always been a collection of people that get caught up in the proliferation of conspiracy theory-like content throughout history, right? There have been, long before the internet, long before the advent of the Industrial Revolution, there have been rumored and murmured underground explanations for all the horrible real things in the world and all the horrible imagined, made up things in the world. It's not new. But let me ask this really serious question. 60 years of content supposedly exposing all that there's got to be exposed, and a 60 years of a growing movement of people that believe it and buy into it and share it and spread it and judge others according to it. And a movement that, despite lacking a temple, acts very much like a religious cult when it comes to how they proselytize, how they judge others, and how they dismiss and belittle and psychologically attempt to manipulate others who will not jump on board, right? Who will not agree just because they can recite a few fancy talking points about how they're totally, absolutely right and everyone else is evil. Why hasn't anything been fixed? That's my question. It's a big setup. All these ifs. If all of that stuff is going on and they're right and they're, the righteous and true, chosen by God. I mean, and I'm asking this, I ask this broadly, but I also ask this specifically in terms of Donald Trump. If Donald Trump, dear MAGA country, dear Trumptopia, however you self-identify, however you rationalize your ongoing support for Donald Trump, if he is God's chosen one, as many of you perpetually claimed and stated throughout especially in the early years, why hasn't he fixed everything? Why didn't he win the new election? How did they magically get away with stealing it from him? Why isn't Hillary Clinton locked up? Why hasn't he taken down the evil cabal of whatever you think is the evil cabal? Because there's a lack of consensus there as to who exactly. But, if he's God's chosen effing man, why is he puttering around at his golf course in Mar-a-Lago canceling his 1-year anniversary celebration of 1/6 and dodging the ever encroaching series of investigations and trying to run out the clock on every possible front and losing so many cases in court? And please don't tell me because the entire system is corrupt and evil and run by Satan. If he's God's man, he should be winning over Satan. If he's the chosen one, prophesied by conspiracy theory and biblical scripture, y'all built a golden statue of him, for fuck's sake. Why isn't he fixing? If I alone can fix it, why hasn't he alone fixed diddly squat? And why is everyone still arguing about stuff around him as if they can't just ask him? Like, why doesn't he answer up to his own claims and statements and promises? Why does it feel like Trump is just not Trumptopian enough for Trumptopia anymore? Now that he continues to endorse the evil, horrible, demonic vaccine, right? Like, I don't believe that that's evil and horrible and demonic. That's a whole nother thing. It's just wild to me that the same people that think he's God's chosen one are booing him for endorsing everyone getting a booster. It's absurd. And the wide array of differing sort of just incongruous, how do you pronounce that word? Incongruent. It's a way to conjugate that, yeah. Rationalizations and explanations. As we move forward, dear friends, we must not, and now I'm speaking to everybody on this side of the pro-Trump, anti-Trump fence, because believe it or not, listen, I'm that guy that made that meme that has all the issues on us versus them lined up in a row and ends with like, do you see the pattern yet? Right? Pro-Trump, anti-Trump is, in my humble opinion, while there's plenty of really good reasons to make sure that Trump does not cause any more damage, the arguing, the lines of division of just fighting with each other over Trump, that's an engineered ego trap, us versus them, mechanism, just like all the rest. Let us not fight about Trump. Let us help our friends who fell under the sway of his charismatic word magic realize that he's full of malarkey. That he's always been a con artist, snake oil salesman of charm and not delivering. And then suing people who go, hey, why haven't you delivered? And more importantly, as I always like to bring things back to, let's focus on facilitating that demographic in healing past the damage done by such a mind fuck. Because we're not going to win. I am, acknowledging that I am over here a member of the Stop Trump coalition, right? As again, not because I irrationally hate the man, because I'm desperately concerned. He's obviously someone in deep need of spiritual healing, which is why he has successfully and maliciously enjoyed creating so much chaos and havoc and spreading such cuckoo nonsense malarkey in our political stage or playing field. And while I do think we must put a stop to the efforts to reinstate him into a position of power, whether it's the Speaker of the House or presidential run in 2024, there's more to it than just that, right? We need to heal ourselves and each other so that we can heal the system itself. Because falling for the pit trap, the ego trap of violent insurrection, that's what, we saw what happened. And we can imagine what it would have been like if it got worse. And we will never, if there's a lesson life and history at large, I think, has tried to beat into our consciousness, it's that brutally killing each other to solve problems doesn't ever actually solve any of the problems. To take a big, broad zoom back, a big step back in a macro zoom view historically, war after war, whether it's revolution or invasion or righteous blah 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 or villainous tyranny, whatever, war after war, the organized butchering of fellow human beings has only ever rendered one thing, and that's financial profit. Everything else it has failed to successfully solve or produce on, right? It doesn't really solve any problems. It doesn't really prevent the repetition of similar problems. It doesn't really stop crime. It doesn't it most certainly sure as fuck doesn't ever end hunger. all it does is render a wasteland of toxic suffering and profiteering. So why are so many people foaming at the mouth and chomping at the bit to try and solve more problems with violence? Dear friends, I humbly invite you to join in community building wherein we acknowledge this and we establish the collective wisdom of always comprehending this, acknowledging this, understanding this, right? And honoring it. This reality that violent warfare, regardless of scale, whether it's one-on-one or nation against nation or North versus South or insert us versus them, insert here your favorite version of us versus them, useless. And while, yes, of course, if some monstrous tyrannical tyranny rises up and attempts to bully and butcher the rest of the world, of course you must make a stand and put a stop to it. But where it's all fear-mongering now at this point. It's all illusory fear-mongering, and it's really about creating violence at more and more individual levels. Look around at the way it's being the way it's playing out. Look at the escalation of violent activity on airlines over the past year. The escalation of racially motivated violent crimes against minorities over the past year, etc., etc. Now, there's a vicious cycle because there's fear-mongering that leads up to that, and then the very reporting of the violence is labeled in a dismissive way as fear-mongering, but it also then becomes fear-mongering itself. There's so many layers of it, and everyone's so wound up in it, and so many people are still attached to some savior mascot that's going to fix it all that clearly hasn't yet, and odds are probably won't ever, based on historical failure of one individual ever fixing it all. Which leads to the series of questions: how do we really, quote unquote, fix this cornucopia, this cacophony of so many different problems that are intertwined and intertangled and interconnected? Put a pin in that, folks, because it is, of course, one of the central themes of this show. We've talked about it before, and we'll talk about it again. And for right this hot second, I'm going to play yet another track, and then we'll wind down this episode. Here's Dark Nights, Early Sunsets, a cinematic trailer 101 live to tape, robot, electronic, audio entertainment, performance by DJ Zed. If there is a message or a point to today's episode, it is this: let us transcend the us versus them programmatic thinking and transcend the nonsensical ideology of fixing things through war, revolutionary or otherwise. Let Let us heal our minds and hearts and souls from the addiction to trying to fix our problems through organized violence. As always, friends, namaste, and thank you for tuning in. May peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts. Please tell your friends about this show and the various other projects I'm working on. Let them know they can visit solo.to/Mr. Zeppo to support this struggling content creating online artist. Thanks for tuning in. Come on back for more. There's plenty of content for you to consume. The Almost Daily ZenCast is a production of C-Tech Studios. All ideas and opinions are entirely that of the host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Peace out, humans.